So yeah, why don't you share some thoughts on this record and some tidbits?
Yeah, so it's so funny you mentioned Good Riddance because that is my first note. It says similar to Good Riddance. So when I
Yeah.
was listening to this, it immediately caught my ear. Maybe just because Good Riddance is, on enough of a rotation for me on a yearly basis. But yeah, just kind of that similar, 4-piece kind of fast-paced punk, kind of melodic hardcore influence. Not a lot of lead guitar parts, but they know how to write, really catchy songs with still kind of enough grit to them. So what I thought was interesting on Rise Against, and I'd be interested to hear your thought on. So they
Yeah.
did 4 albums with the same producers at the Blasting Room, and I was curious to what you think about bands that kind of keep going back to the same producer. Do you like when you can kind of count on the same sound coming from a band, or do you like when bands kind of diversify a bit and when you see that with a different producer, it's like, oh, okay, he worked with these kind of bands. I wonder how that will
Yeah.
make this band come out.
I mean, I don't know if I have a preference one way or the other. Like there's something to say about a band going back to the same producer, or even like a let's say like a collection of bands working with the same producer. Just knowing like, oh, if what they put out previous was good, then why not, right? But if it was kind of like, oh, it was okay, why did you go back to him? Like, I don't know. I don't. Producers are also something that I don't really look at too closely very often. Like I noted, like I took note. I saw that Siren Songs was recorded with Bill Stevenson, right? I saw that.
Well, no, actually, this one wasn't. So they went to Garth Richardson.
Oh,
Um,
so is it the next? One of them I saw was with Bill
so
Stevenson.
they did Revolutions Per Minute, the one that came out before
Yeah,
this, and then the following 3
that
after
explains
this
it.
one. And so that's what was interesting about this is they said that they went to Garth to kind of try switch things up, and it didn't really go how they were hoping to, and so they ended up
Yeah,
going back to the Blasting Room. And I mean, Garth Richardson is a huge renowned producer. He's done a ton of awesome albums, um, and so it's not that the album sounds bad, but I
yeah,
think
yeah.
just a big part of being in a studio is the chemistry you have with the producer, and if
Hmm.
they're not completely on board with what you're doing, then that makes a big difference. So but
Yeah,
yeah, so the band spent its first 4 years signed to the independent record label, Fat Records, like we mentioned, on which they released 2 studio albums, The Unraveling and Revolutions Per Minute. Both the albums were met with underground success, and in 2003, the band signed with the major label DreamWorks. So this was Rise Against's major label debut, so the Siren Song with Counterculture, which brought the band mainstream success, largely in part to the popularity of the singles Give It All and Swing Life Away. So Rise Against's extensive touring schedule helped to establish an early fan base and attracted the attention of DreamWorks, to which they signed to. The general consensus among Fat Records musicians was that major record labels sacrifice musical integrity in exchange for commercial profit. Rise Against held the same belief, but eventually came to the conclusion that unlike other labels, DreamWorks supported their politically charged lyrics. And according to Mikhail Rath, the singer, their faith in what we do and the fact that they cared about stuff we cared about was an eye-opener. So that was just kind of interesting. So this was their first major label debut, and
hmm
it's still Rise Against.
yeah,
If you didn't know that and you listened to Revolutions, then this one, it's a similar sound, and so
yeah.
that's cool that they were kind of still able to go with that.
It's kind of an interesting fact that you bring up, talking about Rise Against, having these politically charged lyrics and going from a label like Fat Wreck and signing to a major label, because there were a few like super political bands. I don't know if super political is the right word, but where their lyrics were typically political that I got into. And I mean, one of those ones I brought up a few times was Rage Against the Machine, and that's something that they dealt with. I don't know that they were ever really on an independent label. Like I think Rage Against the Machine's like debut album, I'm pretty sure was on a major label. I could be
Yeah,
wrong, but they faced that kind of criticism a lot, right? Like in going, you're a band that has this message, yet you're signed to a major label. And, you know, like their approach to that, their thought to that was, yeah, we made some sacrifices in that way, but it also helped, you know, us take our message from, you know, a small audience to a ginormous audience, right? Like a gigantic audience that Rage Against the Machine had, and even still has, seeing as they're back together,
Yeah.
quote unquote, you know, as tours aren't happening at this moment. But, you know, so for Rise Against, who obviously they share the word against in their names, you know, a similar thing. They're able to, obviously they sign to a major label and they end up having radio success and getting their song out there. Like, no doubt they went from playing one size of a show to a completely different size of a show, not to the level of Rage Against the Machine, but being able to take that message that they have and expand it and share it, even like just expand that reach. I think sometimes just gets overlooked in the whole, like, punk rock elite sort of thing, right? Where they go, oh, you know, the people who take issue with a band signing to a major label. It's like, well,
Right.
I mean, you know, it might be one thing if that band is just like, you know, writing songs about being, you know, whatever, like just writing songs about whatever, don't necessarily have one, you know, cohesive message sort of thing. And it's like, oh, you just took it for the money. That could be one thing, and to me that's still fine. I'm like, can bands not make a living? Like,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
it's probably nice for them to be able to pay their bills, but at the same point, like the fact that they took a message and they didn't shy away from that message, right?
Yeah.
So that's pretty awesome. But myself, I'd kind of mentioned, you know, I was pretty heavy into Rise Against for their first 2 records, but it kind of fizzled out by this point, and I don't really have a reason why. Like, it's not like I'd hear them on the radio and I was like, going back on the, sellouts or anything like that. I never had that problem, right? Like, I mean, one of my favorite bands at that time was Blink-182. So, I mean, like they were all over the place, right?
Yeah.
But I found it interesting. I don't know who it was from the Talking Records podcast, but they commented on an Instagram post. They said, I listened to their first 2 records so many times, I kind of burnt myself out on them. By the time these 2 records came out, I enjoyed them, but wasn't as invested. And I wouldn't. So again, I don't know who that was from Talking Records.
I think that'd be Jed.
Maybe, yeah. I don't know who runs their social medias, because
Yeah.
I think Craig commented later. But anyway, I don't think I ever really even gave these records a chance. So it was kind of fun to go in and listen to them, knowing a couple of the songs because they were on the radio. But I do have one of these records that I like more than the other. So let's get into the songs. The first one that you brought up was Paper Rings.